Welcome to the Digital Ascent Podcast. This is episode 0004, and today we'll be discussing the recent Warner Brothers restructure and anti-cheat in video games. Hope you guys enjoy.
So thank you guys for tuning in to the Digital Ascent Podcast. This is episode 0004. The main topic today is going to be anti-cheat in games, but the current event we're going to open with the Warner Brothers restructuring. And for that, I'm going to let Jordan do some talking about this because he's the one that's kind of read up on this. And I want to see what he has to say because this is, based on what I've seen so far, they're making some pretty big moves. Is that correct, Jordan?
Yes, sir. And, the crazy thing is, we're recording here kind of at the beginning of August. So by the time this episode comes out, we will definitely have more information on like what's going on. But holy crap, like Warner Brothers dropped some bombs here at the end of this week. What's today? August 7th. So first week of August, and they've dropped bombs, man. I don't know if people understood or maybe had ideas that this was going on, and we've got some articles that we're gonna kind of go through and cover, and I guess there's some signs that maybe hinted to this a couple months ago, but if you are a normal consumer like myself and the fine gentleman in this podcast, this is probably a surprise to you as well. So the big piece of this here, and I think the big thing that most people will care about is HBO Max is going away. And it's not going away in its entirety, but the name HBO Max, the app as we know it, will be shut down next summer, and it'll be merged into one of Warner Brothers' other, streaming apps, the Discovery Plus app, which I don't think, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure if you would know either. I don't know. I don't watch a lot of stuff or actually anything. I don't think I've ever used Discovery Plus, but I don't think that it's an app that's been around for longer than like a year, if that. I think
I can't say I've used it, to be honest.
Exactly. So this is the reason that the reason I bring this up is it's weird, right? Like I would think that if I'm Warner Brothers right now, like HBO Max is fighting above its weight class. You know what I mean? Like it's one of my favorite streaming services. Like, hey, I'm real tuned in to what the people are liking, and we really like HBO Max. All right, now that's a real generalized term, but just speaking to you guys and having the general understanding we're all on the same page. We don't use Discovery Plus, and I get it. We are not the four horsemen of streaming services everywhere, but this is the thing that confuses me: is more people are using HBO Max than Discovery Plus. So why would we get you know what I mean? Why would we get rid of one and shift that over into the other? So my thought process here. And this is going into the grand, overall theme of why this kind of transition is happening. My thought process here is Warner Brothers obviously is trying to save some money. They're looking at where they can cut costs, and again, we have some articles that we'll link, here to corroborate this. But it seems like Warner Brothers understands that they are spending two different streams of revenue on, maintaining all of their streaming apps, right? We could look at like CNN Plus, which was an app that launched just a few months ago and was literally shut down a few weeks after that. And so, I think, that's an app that was owned by, the Warner Brothers, Discovery, application. And that's one of those events that, kind of people who are paying attention to this stuff were kind of like, that's probably not the last one that's going to happen to. So we look at these two apps, and I think that Discovery, it's been around longer, I think, than HBO Max, and I can confirm that. Right now, that's my assumption. It's been around longer. Warner Brothers has spent more money on getting like the infrastructure set up on the Discovery Plus side. So they'll get rid of HBO Max, they'll merge everything over on Discovery Plus, and they'll now have one big giant, streaming app that all of their, their IPs or their intellectual properties can be viewed from, right? Instead of getting it from different places across the board, you're kind of splitting your viewer base there. But here we go back to the shock value stuff. It's not just like, hey, we're shutting down this app and that's the end of everything that's going on. They're also like restructuring some of their DC IPs, and actually not some, all. They did announce Friday morning or Thursday evening. I might be wrong on that, but late this last week, August 7th, the week of August 7th, the DCEU, the DC Expanded Universe, that's their movie universe opposite of the MCU, right, is going to be reset.
That's wonderful branding.
It just
I like it. So unique.
I am. It is. We're now talking about like hundreds of millions of dollars to, if not billions of dollars at this point, to kind of set up or create an expanded universe that would literally rival.
Just toss me $1 million out of that budget. That's all I need.
Dude, at this point, you know what I'm saying, Sean? Like, at this point, I feel like a lot of fans are thinking the same thing. And it doesn't just stop at the movies. This is also affecting some of their TV shows and some of the movies that were already in post-production. So one of those, which I think was the nearest to be, it's already completed. It's Batgirl. Batgirl was just canceled. That'll never see the light of day. That was not, to my understanding, this was a continuation of the version of Batgirl that was played by Ruby Rose on the CW TV show. This was a big deal, though. It was supposed to take place in the same universe as like Ezra Miller's Flash and Ben Affleck's Batman, and like Michael Keaton was on the bill to he was going to show up and play Batman, man. Like, Brendan Fraser was on the cast. Like, the movie was already completed. It was in post-production and almost completed, and it was just canceled. They just took it off, and they said, hey, this is not, it doesn't meet the tone or the direction that we're trying to go. And that, stuff starts to come out. I don't think that it would have been a giant success anyways. And, I mean, like, some of the early reports from their test audiences were saying it felt like a bad episode of TV. And I feel like that's not really something that you want.
It's still crazy though, because I'm looking at the content now, and it's estimated they spent $90 million making that film only to can it. I can't believe that they wouldn't at least release it in some format. Maybe not the big screen, but like drop it on your streaming
on the
platform
Discovery
at the very least,
or HBO. Exactly, but that's not even the only one to get canceled. Off of it. They had there was another Supergirl. There was a Supergirl project that was getting ready to come out that was going to, come out on the opposite side of this Flashpoint event. And it was a big deal. A Latina Supergirl. Like, this was like, hey, for the culture, yes! That just got canceled. And same boat, I believe they spent upwards of $50 million on production already.
Oh, my God.
And I think I think it was earlier this week, it's canceled. It's done. They're not doing it. So the big point here is, for everybody that's listening to this point, the big takeaway here is that HBO Max will be going away in the very near future. To my knowledge right now, the migration or like the cutover for HBO Max to dissolve and like fade into Discovery is not happening until next summer. So that's the scheduled kind of date right now. By the time this episode comes out, we'll have a bunch of articles or information linked to the show notes, so you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And on top of that, again, we'll have more information by the time this episode, goes live. We'll have another couple of weeks for Warner Brothers to kind of come back and give us more understanding of what's going on, because right now they haven't given very much of anything outside of, we want to do some restructuring, and all of these different moves will allow us to do better and compete better in our different markets. So
I'd imagine this is why the Arrowverse stuff is being wrapped up too, right?
I believe so. Yeah,
I think Flash is on its last season now.
Yes, you're exactly
right. They announced
right.
one more, and that's it.
And Teen Titans also was just canceled. So
Arrow was canceled, I think, during COVID, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. So this has been a long time coming, I think. As soon as Zack Snyder, they realized that they didn't want to go down that direction, I feel like they said, hey, the DC needs a soft reset or a hard reset. Flashpoint was supposed to be that, but now there's a bunch of stuff going on with Ezra Miller and all this other stuff. So it's like, hey, for Warner Brothers' sake and DC, this this kind of refresh fits their brand anyways. They're getting ready to can a bunch of stuff, and it's Febreze Brothers. Let's give it a fresh start, and we'll go from there. And
so good.
I'm genuinely excited to see. I don't want to say excited, but interested to see where they
Oh
go.
yeah, I mean, we don't have a choice. So
Yeah.
Sean, what was your question?
Yeah, I had a question really quick. So I didn't get a chance to read it. Did they give any price points as far as what that overall subscription looks
Absolutely
like?
not.
Is that
Absolutely
think
not.
so.
Yeah, no. And I don't even know, like right now, and that's the funny thing is right now there's probably going to be some room for them to increase whatever the price point is right now. I think I'm paying like
that's what I
$10
figured.
or something for HBO Max. I would imagine that Discovery is the same thing, but if they're going to merge the two services, like you're getting
15
two times
I'm
the
gonna-
content. And so,
I'm gonna say 15. That's gonna be my hat in
which
the
is
bag
not
there.
bad, Yeah, and it allows them to be
Depending on what
competitive
you
as
get.
far as like, Netflix is concerned. You pay, I think right
Yeah.
now for like a HD subscription at a minimum, it's like $17 or something like that. So, they're gonna stay competitive. Just
Yep.
it depends on what we're looking at. We'll have to wait more for that, and I don't imagine that we'll get any of that information anytime soon. We're probably looking at like Q1 for those things at the earliest of next year. So,
Right.
stay tuned.
I mean,
we'll talk about it here.
full fledged HBO Max is already $15 a month
Oh crap! Okay,
with
so
without
there it is.
ads. Yeah,
Okay, well,
you've
never
got the
mind.
ad supported,
Okay,
and you've got you've got two versions of it, two tiers. So I mean, if they combine that, I'd imagine it's gonna go up because they're gonna be like, well, we're giving you more for the money, and
Yeah.
you know.
I agree. I think they'll
It'll
do
be
the
tiered,
same thing. Of,
maybe.
look, I also
Maybe so. I
agree
mean,
with
I'm
that.
sure they'll probably still do the ads and no ads sort of deal.
I hope.
I feel like
'cause
most
if we-
everybody is now.
If we continue back down this path of like, oh, we're just going to continue to segment, the subscription service, like we're literally just at like internet based cable subscription services now, and
We're
it's just
there.
like, that's
Why can't,
I know,
what
and
do
I
you
don't
mean
want to go
continue
further
down the path.
I don't
We're
want to. I don't want to
here.
go
It's
further
so
down
annoying.
that path.
All right,
Like,
we're
it's
getting
like the video
sidetracked.
game
We're getting
platform,
sidetracked.
except worse.
It really is.
This is
Sorry,
true.
I will
This
rant.
is hard stop. Let's hard stop.
I
and-
will rant about
Different
this.
topic.
I hate this.
Different topic.
Brett, we'll pass
save
it
that for
on.
another
We'll
day.
pass it on back to you. We got the current events out of the way, sir. Can you tell us a little bit about what our main topic is today?
Absolutely. I did want to read this other little tidbit out on the podcast, which is apparently between HBO and HBO Max programs, there's been 140 Emmy nominations for their content, and that's the most of any other network. So I'm sure they're probably leaning on that too as justification to like, hey, we can do whatever we want because
But why get rid of that
we're already-
name?
I don't know, man. I guess they feel like if anybody can do it, they can do it. So,
Oh, that's a good
I
point.
mean,
Yeah, look at all
HBO's
our-
been around a minute, man. HBO's been around
Yeah.
a lot longer than some of the other ones. So, not in this form factor necessarily, not in the service package, but I mean, gosh, I remember watching HBO 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, so okay, yeah. So we'll jump into the main topic. Something I did want to call out because I didn't call it out earlier. Not that it matters so much now, but we do have the entire crew with us tonight. We've got myself, Jordan, Matt, and Sean all here tonight recording this. For this main topic, we are talking about anti-cheating games, and this is an interesting one because, and I do want to clarify too that this kind of really only applies for the most part to multiplayer games. And that's where this comes into effect. Obviously, you're not really looking at stopping people from cheating in a single player game. Like a lot of your single player games even still have, console commands and key combinations and stuff like that you can enter to quote unquote cheat. So this topic here, we're specifically talking about online multiplayer games where cheating has been prominent ever since their inception pretty much. And so, the big thing around this, and anybody that plays video games that has a multiplayer component will know that this has been a struggle for many, many years. It's never been perfected. Some games have done better jobs than others. I should say some developers have done better jobs than others. And there's always this struggle. And so that's what we're going to cover tonight, with the first point being cost. as being the number one kind of hurdle that these developers are facing when it comes to implementing any sort of anti-cheat or mitigation into a game. And what's crazy about that is that when I did research on this, and I don't know if you guys were able to find anything after the fact, after I posted notes and stuff like that, but I was unable to find any real numbers. There's a lot of speculation as to how much. Okay, I'm glad I wasn't like just bad at doing research then, because there's lots of people on Reddit, that speculate, these types of developers and software engineers cost this much and blah 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 blah. I'm not going to throw any numbers out tonight, because you can go Google that and find people having essentially the same kind of conversation we're having right now. But these people or these developers are spending lots of time, just enormous amounts of time, as well as money, and then just the fact that they even have to hire individuals to maintain these things. So like I said, I wasn't able to find at any cost, but you can just imagine, given those three kind of components of it, that it's not cheap. And this is also when, the big focus for a lot of these developers, obviously, is, especially coming into it, is less anti-cheat and more, what are we going to do to hook players? We have to have good content, right? We have to keep them coming back. Once again, we're talking about online multiplayer games. It's not like your solo experience, your single player games, where you build 30 hours of content and then that's it and you're done. We're talking about a kind of a dynamic games. Like a big one that comes to mind when I think of that, like a service, a game as a service would be something like Destiny 2, where they're constantly iterating, they're constantly building onto it. They're constantly giving you a reason to come back. Me and Sean know that all too well. And heck, Jordan too. I know Jordan's a big fan of Destiny too.
Yeah.
But so for these sorts of folks, there are platforms that are already out. There are companies that make specifically like anti-cheat platforms for these developers to use, so that the developer themselves do not have to build their own platform. The big one is VAC, or Valve Anti-Cheat. That's one that is completely integrated into Steam. If you're a fan and a player of Counter-Strike, Left 4 Dead, any of the kind of Steam or source-based games, you've seen a VAC pop up at some point or another. That's free to developers. Once again, that's tied to the Steam platform. As far as I know, in the research that I did, the Steam platform is, or I should say VAC, is specific to the platform in a way where the developer would have to integrate their game into the whole Steam platform in order to take advantage of VAC. So it's not like they can just kind of throw VAC into the game and then publish their game everywhere. So that's one downside to that. And then that still leaves, the developers themselves to have engineers and resources assigned to making sure that that's, that anti-cheat system is compatible with their game. And then you have other ones too that are much more universal. Easy Anti-Cheat, I know a lot of us have seen that, as well as BattlEye. Easy Anti-Cheat is actually also free. That's the one offered by Epic Games. It does not tie them, ironically, it does not tie the developers to the Epic Games store. And they've vowed that they're not ever going to do that. So that's interesting.
I'm going to jump in and disagree with you there, man. I don't actually find that I guess it's interesting, but it's not very surprising. If you look at, if you just kind of look back at the history between Valve and Epic has been kind of branding itself as this developer friendly storefront and platform. And you see that even with some of the rates that they put in there, and it's part of their shtick, gimmick, whatever, however you want to phrase that, right? It's the concept that they can be nicer and charge less and less aggressive, and that you don't have to play hardball to do it. You don't have to play hardball to get by.
Yeah,
just my 2 cents on it.
Think about when we did the episode with Terms of Service. I would say GOG and then Epic were my 2 favorite terms of service that I read. So I guess that kind of makes sense that they're trying to be that way. And look at all the free games they give you. I mean, dude, every month they're giving you free games. So I guess that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing other things to keep you coming to their platform. Things that Steam's only recently started doing. Like, when did you see Steam giving away free games prior to Epic doing it? Every now and then you get a free game on Steam now.
Gave free games away.
And it's very rare. It's very rare, and it's nothing like Epic Games where they're doing like bi-weekly releases of stuff and stuff like that. Yeah. Same with like if you have Prime and all that, you've got a bunch of free games that you can get. But anyways, we're sidetracking a little bit. But so yes, easy anti-cheat on that side. Games like Apex Legends, Rust, Fortnite use that. Of course, Fortnite's going to use that because they're built by Epic Games. BattlEye is another one. And I do want to say that, just because these are free, you would think that because these have such a wide breadth of saturation with games that they would be better. But it actually is the opposite. And we'll get to that eventually. But some of these more open source, if you will, they're not really open source, but these open platforms like Easy Anti-Cheat and VAC, they've been around for so long and they're a part of so many different games that they've been cracked time and time and time again by people making cheats essentially. So you also have BattlEye. BattlEye is not upfront about their costs. They are not free. That is in games like PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, or PUBG as it's called, or for short, Rainbow Six Siege, Escape from Tarkov. So somewhere along the line there, they've made an agreement with the BattlEye devs. I don't know what that looks like financially to integrate that. Once again, that's another one of those things. All of these that I've mentioned so far are, someone is managing the cheats that are specific to that game. So it's not like the developers are able to just flat out implement it and then rely on the actual anti-cheat provider. They're just essentially, it's very similar to you buying antivirus for your computer. They're gonna manage the knowns. But the unknowns are kind of up to you. You have to not click on things you shouldn't click on. This is kind of the same with this, where they have to be on the lookout for things that are specific to their game and their code that could be exploited, that the generic anti-cheat's not going to catch. So that's where we kind of jump into the in-house development of anti-cheat solutions. Obviously, those are going to be more costly because they have to hire a whole development team to do this, engineers to maintain it. It's not a one and done sort of thing. None of these are. They have to put these systems in place and then they have to maintain them over time, because for just as much work as they're putting in, the cheating community, the cheating development community is putting in 2 times as much time to get around, a block for an aimbot, or a block for ESP, or, wall hacks and so on and so forth.
That's all money, the difference, man. Though. Well, we'll think about it this way, right? You have a limited team of people that are specifically working at a company to counteract this. You have a huge, millions of players and people that could potentially try to break through that code. Now, they may not all do that, right? But some of them definitely, there's definitely a community for it, obviously, because they continue to do it. So you the resource distribution between those that are actually trying and the ones that are defending is probably unbalanced, I would think, because it costs way more money there on the developer side than it does on the community that can then sell that product to other gamers and go, hey, we've got aimbot, we've got wall hacks, all this stuff. So I could definitely see how that would be a difficult thing to combat.
So I have a question here, and it sounds like I came ready for this question, okay? Because I knew if anybody was going to know about anti-cheat, it was going to be y'all, okay?
Right,
so
go for it.
If, especially, look, you don't even have to know a lot about anti-cheat or why it's needed, and in order to know why it's needed, I mean, in 2022, playing an online game, I mean, these games are rampant with cheaters today. My kids are going to know what a cheater looks like before, I did. Because it's just going to be, you know what I mean? When they're up and playing video games. So the question that I have for you guys is I want to use Call of Duty as a prime example. All right. There have been Call of Duties coming out every year for the last 20 years. That's been the schedule for Activision. Okay. And I am curious as to why it took them so long to have like a reliable anti-cheat put into their game. All right. So I'm not like a frequent player of Call of Duty now, but like speaking to their anti-cheat like Ricochet, that was only implemented, I think, last year when Vanguard rolled out. And so they were rolling Warzone without an anti-cheat, and all of the Call of Duties prior to that without anti-cheats. And like Activision was having to manually ban tens of thousands of people like every month or so. And it was for years they did that. Like this has been a thing for a while, but the community got really upset about it, you know, right after Call of Duty 2019 came out, Modern Warfare 2019, and they said, hey, an anti-cheat is coming, it's coming. Don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. And then we finally got one, but they're still kind of tweaking it and stuff like that. So anyways, my point is, why did they not launch? Like, why, as soon as they realized that cheaters were a problem in their game, why did it take them so long to do anything? They didn't even they decided they were going to make their own anti-cheat, but like in the interim, their option, their you know, the route that they took was to just manually ban people. And it, like, you want to talk about like resources being wasted. I mean, their player base suffered. Watch time, view time suffered across the board on Twitch, YouTube, because nobody wanted to play their game. So, you know what I mean? Like, I guess my question here is why did it take so long? Why do we?
I think a lot of it was a big shift to the BattleNet ecosystem. There is, if you look it up, and I remember this being part of the research I did on this topic, there were actually, back when Call of Duties were actually being released on Steam and whatnot, there were iterations of Call of Duty that were being protected by VAC.
That makes sense.
By virtue of being released on Steam.
Okay, the Steam version kicked in. Okay.
So back when they were quote unquote multi-platform, if you will, across the PC ecosystem, they did have some level of coverage from some of the solutions I've already mentioned. And I think with their move over to the BattleNet platform, they did not have a good solution for that yet.
Doesn't make any sense.
And that's why 2019 suffered. And because they were doing everything manually. They were just investigating reports from the players. And they had a team, quote unquote team. Team could be, as small as 2, or it could be 200. We don't know, I don't think. But right, exactly. So they're like reviewing, they're reviewing tickets and this guy looks like he's cheating. You know what I mean? And then they're going through that and doing that process, and that's why it was terrible. Exactly.
Dude, and
that was
the part,
a good idea.
Dude, that's what I'm saying. It's like they decided one, and it's not like in 2019 we were already well into the games as a service, live games, being a thing. You know what I mean? I think that push or that kick happened in 2017. We were already. It's not like Activision had not put games out before that relied on the community coming back to the game. So in my mind, it makes no sense outside of like greed of why they were in a rush to remove their games, their games that are still being supported from the Steam ecosystem to put over on their own game launcher that did not offer the same supporter protection that Steam had. And all they had to do was wait until it was ready. You know what I mean? Like it's like the Cyberpunk thing all over again. And I'm not going to go on a tangent about Cyberpunk, I promise. It's just like, why do we rush things before they're ready, especially in a day and age where like your game's survival time is severely dependent on how much the community engages with your game. So maybe launching a couple titles without, an anti-cheat is not the best idea. Especially when your only alternative or answer to that is to manually ban people by the thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands every couple of months.
Here's the thing, though. I think this will get addressed in some capacity a little bit later on, as far as maybe some of the whys, because there are reasons. There's other negative impacting factors beyond the player base for you implementing the anti-cheat as well. And I don't want to steal Brent's
I'm aware of that.
So some of the technical stuff, and we'll get into that. We won't spend too much time on that because I don't want to go down that rabbit hole too far. But But absolutely, and I do think there's a little bit of the mentality from Activision and the involved parties, the developers and whatnot, of too big to fail. People always come back to Call of Duty, regardless of whether anybody here likes it, loves it, hates it, whatever. This is the exact reason, if you've been following news, why Sony is very upset still about this merger for Microsoft and Activision. And all those IPs and stuff like that, because even though Microsoft is saying, hey, we're not going to make it exclusive to our devices, to the PC and to the Xbox, they're still concerned that later on it may become an exclusive. And Sony has flat out mentioned, I don't think it was the US based Sony either. I'm trying to think of where it was. I'll have to find that and maybe throw that in the show notes just for an interesting fact for folks that actually care about it. But it kind of leaked out that like Sony was super concerned of, hey, Call of Duty accounts for X amount of cash on our platform yearly, and we don't want to lose that because of this acquisition.
Yep.
So there's so that ties back into the whole, I know you hate it, Sean, too big to fail. You know, they know that people keep coming back to feast on Call of Duty every year, and they're going to have enough people to keep it afloat. There are so many developmental dollars spent on that game and that series. It's just incredible. But anyways,
I do want to just throw out here really, really quickly, and before we segue to our next point, for just because I love sticking it to Activision, I would argue the opposite is true as far as too big to fail. I would argue that they wouldn't have entertained a buyout if they were doing as well as they were 5 to 10 years ago. And if we look at, you know, the last 2 Call of Duty sales, which is maybe why they decided, hey, maybe we need to buck up and implement some kind of anti-cheat, whether it's our own or somebody else's. Obviously, they went the route of implementing their own. But the last 2 years Call of Duties are record low sales for the series out of the last 20 years.
Maybe
since 2019
if you stop
they've declined.
Releasing them every year, you
Absolutely.
might have some better sales.
No, yeah. That's the point. And I still want to just throw it out there. They are the lowest sales for Call of Duty. They are still like top 5, top 10 title bestsellers of the year.
Right.
So only bad in the eyes of Activision. But I would just say that I think maybe, just as a point of thought, food for thought, maybe they started to implement these things. Maybe they entertained, you know, the Microsoft buyout because, hey, we understand our community is not very happy with us. Obviously, they had a whole bunch of shit going on with like their CEO, Bobby Kotick, and ongoing stuff from last year to today, a bunch of like sexual assault allegations and stuff like it's not happy fun time in Activision right now. So I think all of this stuff, even the stuff we're talking about right now, just feeds into like they need to do better, and they know they need to do better across the board. So anyways, Brent, please, let me get myself away from that.
Well, they got lots of streaming coverage too. I mean, you know, you got Tim the Tap Man playing this game. You got hundreds of thousands of viewers. But yeah, I mean, and then you got other companies doing it and doing it right to some extent. We'll get more into that. But Valorant, you know, that's Tencent who does, and that's Tencent and Riot Games and all those guys. They do a platform or an anti-cheat solution that they develop in-house called Vanguard. And we'll get into why that was so controversial here in a little bit. But, you know, that's these guys, they've got the money. They've got the know-how to develop these in-house solutions. Speaking of Riot Games, for Valorant, and so they have that implemented, the Vanguard platform in Valorant in League of Legends. But at first, I don't know if they're still doing this or not. They probably are, if I had to guess. But they offer up to $100,000 to any individual or team of, like, you know, I guess white hat hackers, if you want to call them that can find and document any significant vulnerabilities in their Vanguard anti-cheat system.
Love that.
And I know Matt came in here and added also the bug bounties sort of terminology, which is absolutely. Yeah, I've heard it referred to as that before too.
Yeah, I do want to point out that there are many people out there who make a living doing that. You know, you can teach yourself to code. Go ahead and, you know, teach yourself to work vulnerabilities and, you know, stick your nose around ethically, right? In places that want you ethically.
Asterisks everywhere. No, ethically.
Yeah,
no, for sure. Yeah, ethically.
Yes, ethically. Where people explicitly have said, yes, you can look here. Please tell me if you find anything. And then you need to disclose responsibly, right? So don't go sell it on the dark net. That is the opposite of responsible disclosure.
That's right. And we just
Is
talked
that-
about
but
breaking
that's
into the IT
responsible
industry.
For me,
Mhm.
that's responsible
Yes.
for my checkbook, Matt.
Yeah, I
joking.
mean,
I'm
not in the
joking.
long term. Definitely not if you go to jail. And I guess since I said responsible disclosure, I should cover what that means. In my mind, responsible disclosure looks something like giving the party that needs to be notified, the developer, 30 to 60 days to address the issue, and then then delivering it to a known good disclosure third party. I'm sorry, I wasn't expecting to talk about this, so I don't have.
No, man, I think you're. I think that
No,
I was
we're
laughing.
fine.
I don't think we
It's
have
fine.
to define. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
good. I
sorry.
think we're straight. No, you're
Whatever.
good for double tracking there, man. We all appreciate it. I'm laughing at the wackiness of this. How did we get here?
Yeah.
Ethical hacking,
Well-
Hey, it's,
Well,
it's
you-
part of
you-
it.
for another
It's
day.
part of it.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you invited me to come, talk on the podcast, week after week, and so I'm going to talk about stuff that I think is interesting. In this case, it's bug
No,
bounties and ethical
absolutely, man.
hacking. And no, that's a real part of the anti-cheat discussion, right? Because there are people out there who are helping make your gaming experience better, and they're making a living doing it, and they're
Wait.
basically living like paycheck to paycheck like that.
Yeah, I think there was a thing with Team Fortress 2, right? There was was it Lamau?
I think there was.
Was I reading that up? Like they had somebody come to them. It was Team Fortress 2, and they were taking heavy hits. It was like horrible cheating, and then like one of the gamers ended up finding what was happening and sent it to them, and they were able to get it done. So I mean, I'd have to go find the article that said it, but I remembered reading that during research.
Yeah,
So,
there's
I
been
mean,
quite a few instances of that. There was a group that did that for Grand Theft Auto 5 for Rockstar Games, where that game has been notorious for having slow load times, like the initial load, and like two
remember
guys fixed the code and made it load almost instantaneously across all platforms. And Rockstar actually paid them and implemented the code across all their platforms because
I think
were
they
like,
hired
well,
one of the guys off the team too.
I
wow.
think they did. I think
you'd
you're
love
right.
to see
Yeah.
it.
That's crazy. Yeah, I'd love to
Man,
see it.
that's awesome. I love that.
So
stuff.
once again, tying back to our last episode, breaking into the IT industry, it doesn't have to be specifically like what we were talking about. You could, you could take the reins into your own hands and grab the bull by the horns a little bit, and go ahead and jump into
So-
this sort of stuff too.
Let me
I
ask
do
another
think
question.
Real quick, I serious time back to last episode. I do think that teaching yourself how to penetration test and do vulnerability assessments like that, and then seeking public bug bounty programs, that's a 100% viable self-learned way. And it's going to be hard, but I mean, man, you can definitely do it. Just my 2 cents. Jordy, the floor is yours.
No, for sure. I appreciate it, man. So the question that I have is, I have a general understanding of how anti-cheat, is implemented. Specifically, I know the most recent one, and I guess what I'm looking to do here is just match my knowledge against your guys's, right? The technical powerhouses of the group, and just try to see if we can get an understanding of how anti-cheat is again implemented. And so with my understanding, an anti-cheat like Ricochet, again, Call of Duty's anti-cheat, their in-house anti-cheat, that's something that's implemented, like that's a kernel level anti-cheat, right? And so what that means is if you look at, most people are going to be playing on Windows, computers or machines. And so, your Windows 10, Windows 11, whatever, that's your operating software. And your kernel is normally a layer under that. It's not something that you can see. And normally the things that you install, your software, your hardware, there are these things called drivers that are attached to those. So the first time you plug in a brand new mouse or a brand new keyboard, a driver is getting, installed, or, your computer is matching a driver that it has already to this new software, hardware, whatever. The kernel is where the drivers live, right? So if an anti-cheat is a kernel level anti-cheat, It is specifically being put on that level so that it can monitor and identify everything else that's going on your machine while you're playing the game. Do I have this right so far?
Yes.
I like to think of drivers as little instruction booklets for the computer.
Perfect.
And I would say that the kernel component is like the ability to understand the English language and it's the system that it's the underpinning. It's the ability to read that booklet then and understand what sentence syntax is.
It's like a translation hub.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say at the base of it, kernel language is about zeros and ones and beep boops, and driver language is like, here's what an R looks like when you go to print an R.
I love them dude. And look, man, this is one of the things that like this is why I got into like IT is like learning about this, right? And I've kind of had some knowledge specifically about like the operating software and like the kernel layer and how those things work previous to researching like how anti-cheat worked. But I remember when Ricochet was being talked about, and it was like, oh, that's crazy. A new anti-cheat is being made, and I'm sure lots of anti-cheats have been made in the last 20 years, but Call of Duty for me was the first one that was like, whoa, there's some fame tied to this one, and we get to see how it's going to be implemented because it is drastically needed. And so doing the research into that with like, oh, this is how anti-cheat works. This is how they have the ability to like easily identify who's cheating, ban those accounts, and then more easily stop them from joining, the gaming community again. I know before Ricochet was rolled out, even if you were, banned and by Activision in one of their manual reviews, you could still get around that very easily. More specifically, the diehard cheaters. But even then, I mean, there were still thousands and thousands and thousands of them for Activision to still have to be, banning the amount of people that they were. So I know with this kernel level anti-cheat, it just becomes a lot harder. And I think that's one of the more, I guess, marketable aspects for a layman like myself, somebody who's not really into this and can take a couple minutes to read. That sounds safe and secure. The second question that I have for you guys is, do all anti-cheats work at that level? Are they all on the kernel layer, or?
I believe we're sliding into point 2.
Yes. Yeah, we are. I mean, we have kind of firmly slided into point 2, which is it's a two-parter. Right. Yeah. I mean, because that point 2 is kind of addressing security concerns around kernel level versus application level. You'll also sometimes hear this referred to as ring 3 and ring 0. Ring 0 being kernel, ring 3 being the application level. The big difference here is the ring 3 solution or the implementation is at the application level. Typically, that implementation is only looking at the game assets itself. So any of the game files in the the directory where the game's installed, anything that the game loads in the memory, anything that the game loads in the VRAM, stuff like that. Anything that the game is touching, it's able to see because it's running at that application layer. What you're referring to, Jordan, at the ring 0, and 0 being the very beginning of the chain, being the kernel, that driver. So a lot of times that's like a dual implementation where there's an application layer and a kernel layer with the driver, and they're talking together, they're working together, and that kernel layer is able to see everything going on with the operating system. It's able to monitor everything for data integrity, all the processes, services, system calls, everything. Not just the game. Everything else on your system.
When you're talking about that 0 ring, am I in that application layer? Like you're talking about like the OSI model, right? Like I know I'm throwing it back here with terminology. I just want to make sure that there's not another application layer
It's similar to that, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just expressing kind of like your layers of the OS and what interaction each layer has with files and processes and whatnot.
Jordy, don't feel bad
not the
because
OSI model though.
It's not the OSI model, but
correct. It's similar.
Sparked that. Yeah, it's similar. So
okay, and that is. I'm glad it's similar because I can still visualize it in the same way, right? Like it's the kernel still comes before anything. You know what I mean? That I would see or be able to interact with in a meaningful way as a consumer. Right. Is the just okay? Cool.
And right, and that's where the consumer has brought up concern specifically with very, very thorough, I should say, kernel level driver based anti cheats like Vanguard that Riot Games developed, because the way they implemented it was driver at the kernel level with application on top. It specifically runs all the time unless you close it manually. And that's only an option they added after the fact. It did just, when they originally implemented it, it ran all the time. And you would have to uninstall it completely to get rid of it. Now,
wait, so it was looking at everything that you had running, even if you weren't running the game?
Yeah, burn the witch. Absolutely. Yeah. It was looking at, it was essentially spying on you. Yeah, it was essentially spying on you. So so when it comes down to that, you have to trust. So if you're the consumer and you love playing Valorant at that point in time, anyways, you would have to really love Valorant for one, enough to where you trust Riot Games to not steal your data, any data that's being collected by that kernel level driver, because all that information is getting sent back to a server somewhere, and they tell you, hey, we're only collecting X, Y, and Z, but are they? And the other part of that is,
how do you know?
How do you know? You're taking their word for it. And the other part of that too is someone, a malicious actor, could hack into that driver. If they're not developing it with security in mind, someone could leverage that as a middleman, and they could be stealing your data by way of that anti-cheat solution. And that anti-cheat solution, you've already given it every bit of access on your system that you could possibly give it by letting it install itself alongside the OS at that driver kernel level.
We're also getting into we're also kind of intersecting with our topic last month, where our current events topic, where we talked about TikTok, because if I'm not mistaken, Tencent is also a Chinese owned developer, and if it's not Chinese, I think it's South Korean, but I'm almost positive it's a Chinese publisher.
Very different.
And they are in a similar a lot of people look at Microsoft and they're like, oh my God, Microsoft, they have a monopoly on a lot of stuff, and that could be true in some perspectives, but Tencent in comparison to Microsoft is 2 to 3 times the size as far as publishers and game devs that they have. So when you talk about what it means for a publisher like Tencent to have access to your data, what does that mean for a public? They are really big on microtransactions. Tencent has been under fire for a lot of stuff. So if I'm Tencent, why do I want that data? So I can see what your spending habits are, and I could put more microtransactions in my games that will be easier for you to spend money on. And so, hey, look, I'm not going to tangent anymore down that route. I'm just saying that we're doing a very good job of linking, we're staying consistent with data is important. Make sure that you are paying attention to how your data is being used or stored on your machine or anywhere else. And things like anti-cheat.
It's just something to be aware of. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's just something to be aware of. Because, if you want to play Warzone, you have to use Ricochet. If you want to play Valorant, you have to use Vanguard.
Yep.
Most, if not all of the previous ones I mentioned, VAC, Easy Anti-Cheat, BattleEye, all of those now have some level of kernel and application layer interaction. It's just about how deep they implement said interaction. The only reason I brought up Vanguard was because they were one of the biggest ones, and they had a lot of they made the news with the security concern aspect of it. So the other part of that, so we addressed the really big high level one, the security concern. The other part of that, and this kind of ties back into you, Jordan, asking, well, why didn't Activision do something sooner with Call of Duty? And the other big part of kernel level drivers is that they do tend to have more issues with system stability, performance issues, stuttering, you get FPS drops, even complete system crashes or blue screens of death. Yep, exactly. So that's another big reason why I think a lot of these developers have kind of strayed away from it for as long as possible, or implemented it, but not implemented it at a level where they feel like it's going to be, go against the grain with what they're trying to deliver. Because a lot of these guys are already, you talk about your small time developers and whatnot that already are releasing kind of an early access game. It's not optimized. They're already having troubles kind of getting it up and running. they're already kind of out in the cold on some of these solutions. But it still brings to light, or to question a little bit too, though. Why did Activision take so long? Because they had the money, so their priorities were more on making money than anything else.
And let me ask you another question here for you, because we know that any cheat is not the end all be all as far as, keeping the player base happy with a high quality of life and making sure their games aren't being interrupted by jerkbags, right? So we've heard of I
like that, jerkbags. That's a good term. That's what we'll call
it.
Hey,
I had to keep it family friendly for the podcast right quick. My question here is we've heard of other implementations of keeping the cheaters at bay, where and I couldn't give you a game name as an example, but I know you guys will be familiar with it. Where we've identified this guy as a cheater. Well, we're going to put him in a queue that will only put him against other cheaters, other people that we've identified or tagged as cheaters. So is there a reason?
I would almost think is the way they phrase that.
Yeah, would that not be easier to do and more cost efficient to just reserve some servers for a player base, or a fraction of your player base, and then scale that as needed, rather than doing the Activision approach where they dump a whole bunch of time and resources into their own anti-cheat? What do you guys think about that?
I think that it's cheaper not to process the data of those people. So, I mean, if you're going to do something, then you have to identify them. And then, at that point, if it's either identify them and then shove them into their own islands, and you still have to have servers and resources for them.
Right.
Or you just ban them and goodbye. I guess at that point, if you ban them, you have to start asking yourself questions like, do I ban IPs? And then, do I ban VPNs? And it starts getting stickier. So, I mean, I see arguments
assuming that it identifies it correctly, though. You know what I mean?
So, I mean, there are a ton of false positives.
This kind of
damn, that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, this moves into point 3, which is how effective is it? Because go watch Tim the Tat Man. Even he sits there with however 40K people sitting there, and he's like, they might be, I don't know, maybe they are, maybe they aren't, maybe he's just really good at movement, maybe he's really good at shooting, you don't know. So that's kind of the problem, is you can also negatively affect your player base by false positives, right? And you still have to process that data. You know what I mean? It's not so cut and dry, and that's what's so hard about that.
Ricochet is pretty funny with that, because one of their later kind of updates to Ricochet for Warzone was where cheaters, if it does detect them as cheating, it won't instantly ban them. They're just invisible to every other player. So,
that's right.
Awesome.
Well, let me rephrase, because I phrased it incorrectly. They can't see anybody if they're cheating. So they're running around a seemingly empty map, but other players can see them and kill them in Warzone.
I've seen this happen in real time. And it is fantastic when you get to, I think Tim was playing, and he got killed, he was able to spectate, and you could see it in real time. The guy could not see anything on his screen, but he was getting jacked up.
Right. Yeah, so I mean, there's cool ways for them to do that. The developers are finding unique ways to almost troll these cheaters.
No damage is my favorite one. You just see them,
that's another one.
Peg headshot after headshot, and it does 0 damage.
So I guess, is there, normally I know we kind of, we have the ability to kind of end with a call to action. And I don't know that I don't know that really applies to this episode, outside of hey, if you play a game that doesn't have an anti-cheat, voice your concern. We live in a day and age where it's very easy to get in contact with your developers and publishers of whatever game you frequent. And the even greater thing about our society today is devs and pubs are looking for that stuff actively. They actively are scanning through what the word is about their game. So if enough people are crying about it, chances are it'll be addressed. You know what I mean? You guys have any
that
final
hurts
thoughts?
Revenue streams. That hurts
Absolutely.
revenue streams so bad. They have to address it now, and I think that's the difference, right? It's getting to the point with multiplayer games where if you don't have your game at least halfway on lock, man, you're going to run into some really bad negative feedback, and that spreads like wildfire today. So I feel like a lot of it is on you to report when you do feel, don't do the rage report garbage. That doesn't help.
Oh,
So
that is a great
here's
point,
the problem.
Sean.
Yeah.
Here's the problem
no-
with
no
that.
kidding.
When you false identify, they are now having to sift through that data, and you're helping them because now you're obfuscating, you're putting up weeds for them to have to sift through to find the actual cheaters. So, haha, yes, rage, report them, but now, you do that 20 million times across the entire platform, and now they have to go, well, okay, which one's real, which one's not, and they're wasting resources. So like,
And that's an even great that's a great point, and that's even assuming that people are reporting anyways. And I think it's a lot more frequent today than it was 10 years ago. But make sure that, hey, if you are seeing those things, bugs, whatever, mainly cheaters for the topic here, but make sure you are actively reporting those things. And just like Sean said, don't abuse that feature. Because if you are only hurting the developers who are actively trying to help and make sure that your experience is not tainted by these jerkbags. So
Right.
and
I do have some
your fellow
stats. I don't
players.
have a call of action, and your fellow players. That's right. I don't really have a call to action, but I do have some stats I did want to share with folks because I thought these were pretty interesting. And this was conducted in 2018 across, I think it said 6 different countries: China, Germany, Japan, South Korea, United Kingdom, and the United States. The first one was, I thought this was interesting, and this makes sense. More than half, 60% of gamers have had their multiplayer gaming experience negatively impacted by other players cheating on multiple occasions. That's no big surprise there, right? I mean, I think everybody's here encountered a cheater in whatever game we're playing. So,
Sure.
77% of online players are likely to stop playing a multiplayer game online if they think other players are cheating, and 48% of online gamers are likely to buy less in-game content as a result. So right there, you've got a driving factor for your developers to fix it.
Yeah, that's a lot of revenue. Those are really high percentages. Oh my gosh! Wow.
Yeah, I mean it's super high. So that's another reason why you've got these guys. You see the shift kind of go along with the more in-game content that's added, the more they actually care about keeping malicious actors out of the platform because they're trying to get those legitimate people to stay in the system, spend money in that system, especially your free-to-play games like Warzone, like Fortnite. They're doing
Fortnite.
the best they can possibly do to keep cheaters out, because if they don't, they lose revenue directly. So that's a big one right there that has been identified time and time again.
Who'd have thought that players are less likely to spend money in your game if they're not having a good time?
Exactly. Wow. Yeah. Who would have thunk it? Who would have thunk
Golly,
Really, I mean,
man.
honestly, truly.
Golly. It's like, man, it takes a lot of these devs it's like they're just figuring this stuff out now, man. It's like I feel like we are not regressing as an industry, but like we are constantly playing catch up. It's like the cable thing we were talking about earlier, where we got away from cable like 10 years ago, and now we're falling into the same habits. The gaming industry is going to do the same thing, where we're going to go away from, you know what? It's a conversation for another time. Let me just stop myself right there.
Well, it is funny too, though, where it was also mentioned in that same survey where there were people that answered the survey and said, well, I kept getting, match made against cheaters, so I went out and got cheats myself. and now I enjoy the game.
Man.
Hey,
So,
look, man,
if you can't beat them, join them, sort of deal.
Yeah, you live long enough,
When in Rome.
you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain. Great man once
Yeah,
said
right.
that, and ain't that the truth,
Right.
man?
Great
is
quote.
true.
Great quote, Jordy. Great quote. Love that.
Fantastic one to close this out, bro.
Absolutely.
Well, is that? Do we call that right there? Is that
I think that's it. I think we covered everything we wanted to cover. Absolutely.
a great,
Yeah, that was great,
informative
guys.
episode? Yeah. Thanks everybody. Give
was
us
fun.
Thank you for listening.
join our Discord. And
Yes.
check out our show notes for all of our citations and good info.
What is this,
So-
We can
MLA?
call them tidbits. How about tidbits?
Yes,
We
all
call
right.
'em
Good,
little
good
tidbits.
tidbits. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Digital Ascent Podcast. While I have you here, friendly reminder to check out our Discord channel and forums, both of which can be found linked in show notes, which can be found in the episode's description. See you around.